Welcome to Pages to Dialogues, your premier destination for insightful discussions on Christian books. Join me as we delve into the pages of thought-provoking Christian literature and explore the timeless truths and principles that can transform our lives. From classic devotionals to contemporary bestsellers, we'll engage in meaningful dialogues that will inspire, encourage, and challenge you to grow deeper in your faith. So, subscribe to Pages to Dialogues now and join the conversation. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can stay updated on new episodes and exclusive content. Let's turn pages into conversations that matter.
Think for a moment about that promise Jesus makes in Acts 1:8. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses to the end of the earth. Have you ever really stopped to think about that power and what it means for us today?
That's such a key verse, isn't it? It really sets the stage for what we want to dig into in this deep dive.
Right.
Because we've looked at these sources that, well, they help us see the Holy Spirit not just as some, abstract idea.
Yeah, not just theology.
Exactly. But as God's very active, continuous presence in creation in our own lives in the church.
That's the goal here, isn't it? To kind of cut through the jargon and pull out the real nuggets about the Holy Spirit, where it shows up from the beginning, how it connects with us as people, and, its job in the world. We want to grasp its ongoing work.
Without getting lost in the weeds, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is how those initial almost gut feelings or experiences of the Spirit, how they connect up with the more, let's say, developed theological ideas that came later.
Okay, let's jump into that then, those foundational experiences. The sources mention brilliant flashes of charisma, spirit-possessed enthusiasm, even prophetic spirit and poetic inspiration. Sounds intense.
It really does. These are those moments, right, when people or whole groups, they just encounter something beyond the everyday.
Divine inspiration.
Yeah.
Or finding courage.
Exactly. Maybe it's that burst of creativity that feels like it comes from somewhere else, or just that unshakable strength to stand up for justice, even when it's risky. And a really key idea here is this flesh and spirit thing.
Okay, what's that about? It's not just body versus soul.
No, not really in the way we often think. It's more about two ways of orienting your life. One way is towards goodness, towards justice, powered by the Spirit.
And the other?
The other is more towards, selfishness, being closed off. That's what flesh often points to in this context.
Okay, that clarifies things. Now, this is where it gets super interesting for me. The sources talk about how different cultures tried to explain these powerful feelings. Animism and shamanism are mentioned.
Yeah, and they're presented as still relevant ways to think about it.
So for someone maybe not familiar, what's the core idea?
Well, animism in this sense is a really primal viewpoint where life isn't just in people and animals. Objects, nature itself can have a kind of spirit or agency.
Like the wind sighing.
Yeah, or a river having its own spirit. Shamanism is a bit different. It sees reality as full of this cosmic energy, and shamans are the ones who can, connect with and interpret that energy.
So these ancient ways remind us of a deep connection to the world.
Exactly, that intuitive link to the vitality of everything around us.
And how does the Bible pick up on this? With the Spirit?
Well, the Hebrew word ruah is absolutely central here.
Ruah, okay.
Initially, it really described those powerful, untamed natural forces, wind, breath, storms.
Like in the Psalms?
Yes, like Psalm 104, when you send forth your Spirit, they are created. So the very breath of life, the power in nature, it was seen as divine right from the start.
Wow.
And over time, ruah started to mean more, our inner life, our spirit, and then, crucially, God's spirit, which eventually leads us to the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity.
So ruah is dynamic, powerful, almost wild. What about the Greek word pneuma? Does that add anything?
It does. And pneuma also has that sense of wind and breath, the elemental force, but it brings in another layer. Rational understanding, what the Greeks called logos.
Logos, like divine reason or order.
Kind of, yeah. The underlying pattern or intelligence in things. So pneuma connects spirit with understanding. And also, interestingly, with eros, that life force, enthusiasm, desire.
It's amazing how different cultures seem to tap into this same idea of a fundamental life energy.
Yeah.
The text mentions axe too.
Yes, from the Nago and Yoruba traditions in West Africa and the diaspora, axe is seen as this universal cosmic energy, sort of a life force flowing through everything.
And this links to modern science.
Well, it resonates, doesn't it? Modern cosmology increasingly talks about energy as fundamental. Einstein's EMC quantum physics looking at vibrations, the energy in the void.
Right.
So the point is, this idea of a basic energetic reality isn't just ancient mysticism, it's something science is exploring too. Spirit, in this broad sense, is becoming a real focus again.
Okay, so we've got these foundational ideas, spirit as life, as energy, across different cultures. How does Christian thinking then specifically develop the idea of the Holy Spirit? The sources mention a move from the Spirit to Spirit of Holiness to Holy Spirit.
That progression is really telling, isn't it? It shows a deepening understanding. The Spirit, first felt as this powerful cosmic force, gets more and more linked with God's own sacred nature, God's holiness, hence Spirit of Holiness.
And the Bible shows the Spirit active right from the start.
Absolutely. Genesis 1, the Spirit hovering over the waters. Genesis 2, God breathing Ruah, the breath of life, into Adam. And think of Ezekiel 37, that incredible vision of the Spirit bringing dry bones back to life.
So it's not just that God has Spirit.
God is Spirit. That's the realization. And because God is completely holy, that Spirit is the Holy Spirit.
Okay. Now what about Jesus himself? What do the Gospels say about his relationship with the Holy Spirit? The sources say he doesn't exactly lay out a doctrine.
No, he doesn't give lectures on it, but his whole life, his entire ministry, is clearly lived in the power of the Spirit. It's undeniable.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Think about his baptism. Luke tells us the Spirit descends on him like a dove.
Right.
Then he's led by the Spirit into the wilderness for the temptation. And later, remember when people accuse him of casting out demons by demonic power?
Yeah, in Mark's Gospel.
Exactly. And that leads to his really serious warning about blasphemy against the Holy Spirit.
That's the unforgivable sin, right? What exactly is that? It sounds terrifying.
Well, look at the context. His opponents are seeing the clear work of God's Spirit healing, liberation, and they're deliberately calling it evil, demonic. It's that conscious, stubborn rejection of the Spirit's obvious goodness and power.
Okay, so it's not about accidentally saying the wrong thing.
No, it seems to be about that hardened, willful opposition to God's work. The sources also mention Jesus rejoicing in the Spirit and promising the Spirit will help his followers when they face persecution, giving them the words to say.
And of course, you can't talk about the Holy Spirit without talking about Mary and Pentecost.
Absolutely central. Luke chapter 1. The Holy Spirit comes upon Mary, enabling the incarnation, Jesus becoming human. And then Acts chapter 2, Pentecost. The Spirit dramatically descends on the disciples, empowers them, and essentially births the church as a witnessing community.
That Acts 1.8 promise being fulfilled.
Exactly. Receive power, be witnesses. Pentecost is the starting gun for the Spirit's mission through the church. And those early believers, they really felt they were living in a special time, the end times, when God's Spirit would be poured out widely, just as the prophets promised.
What about the Apostle Paul? His writings are so foundational for Christians. How does he talk about the Spirit?
Hugely important. Paul talks about the risen Christ existing kata pneuma, according to the Spirit.
Romans 8.
That's the one. And he gives us that famous contrast in Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, all those things, versus the works of the flesh, which are the opposite, division, selfishness. Paul also really emphasizes how the Holy Spirit is what unites all believers into one body.
In 1 Corinthians 12.
Yes. And he hints at the incredible intimacy within the Trinity itself, revealed through the Spirit.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit to how the church has understood and experienced the Spirit throughout history. The sources mention the early persecuted church, and then figures like Montanus.
Yeah, the early church definitely had intense experiences of the Spirit, especially when facing persecution. It gave them courage, boldness. Montanism, popping up in the 2nd century, really leaned into the idea of the Spirit still speaking, giving new prophecies and guidance.
Which caused some tension.
It did, yeah. It clashed a bit with the developing structures and authority in the church. Later on, you see monasticism becoming this powerhouse of spirituality, really focused on seeking and living by the Spirit.
And there were big debates about the Spirit's divinity.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just automatically accepted that the Holy Spirit was fully God, equal to the Father and Son. That took time and, frankly, a lot of argument.
Leading to the Council of Constantinople.
Exactly. In 381, that council was crucial. It formally declared the Holy Spirit's full divinity, solidifying the doctrine of the Trinity as we mostly understand it today. A huge moment.
The sources also mention the Greek versus Latin models and the filioque controversy. Can you unpack that a little? Sounds technical.
It is a bit, but it's basically about how the Spirit relates to the Father and the Son within the Trinity. Does the Spirit proceed only from the Father, which was the main Eastern view?
Okay.
Or does the Spirit proceed from the Father and the Son? That's the Western view, adding the word filioque, meaning and the Son, to the creed.
And that difference mattered.
It mattered a lot, actually. It touches on how you understand the relationships within God. It became a major point of division between the Eastern Orthodox and Western Roman Catholic churches. A related concept, more modern, is perichoresis.
Perichoresis.
Yeah, it means like mutual indwelling or interpenetration. It's a way to picture the Trinity Father, Son, Spirit as completely interconnected, flowing through each other, distinct but inseparable, like a divine dance.
That's a helpful image. It's amazing how these theological ideas develop. The sources bring up Joachim de Fiore next, and this idea of a renewed world.
Right. Joachim, back in the Middle Ages, he had this influential idea of history having three ages, Father, Son, and then a coming age of the Holy Spirit.
An age of renewal.
Yeah, an era of greater spiritual freedom, understanding, maybe less reliance on institutions, renovatio mundi, renewal of the world. This idea of the Spirit driving transformation has echoed through history.
And more recently, theologians like Tillich or Comblin.
Paul Tillich saw the Spirit as, like, the presence of God's own life, overcoming the confusion and anxiety of just being human, drawing us toward meaning. Jose Comblin, coming from liberation theology, he really stressed the Spirit's role in, well, liberating people, challenging oppressive systems, calling out empty religion, empowering the poor.
And it wasn't just men shaping these ideas, right? Hildegard of Bingen, Julian of Norwich.
Absolutely not. Hildegard, incredible woman in the Middle Ages. She wrote about the Holy Spirit as this vibrant, greening, divine energy, a nurturing power in all creation.
Wow, greening.
Yeah. And Julian of Norwich, with her comforting visions of God's love, even speaking of God as our mother. The sources also mention reflecting on Mary's unique connection to the Spirit, this idea of the pneumatization of the feminine.
This feels like a good transition to another really big idea.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit and the whole cosmos, the new cosmology.
Yes. This is where things get really expansive. Thinkers like Jürgen Moltmann and Leonardo Boff working with Mark Hathaway.
What are they drawing on?
They're looking at what science tells us now about the universe, the Big Bang, evolution, the sheer scale and complexity of it all. And they're asking, where is the Spirit in this picture?
So not just in the church or human hearts, but in the universe itself.
Exactly. The idea is that the Spirit might be the very energy, the dynamism, the driving force behind the whole cosmic unfolding right from the very beginning. It's inherent in the universe's journey toward complexity and eventually life and consciousness.
Like the universe was sort of programmed for life.
In a way, yes. That it had this built-in potential, this tendency toward self-organization, toward life. Some even connect this to the Gaia hypothesis, the Earth, as a living, self-regulating system, potentially moved by the Spirit's energy.
And our connection through DNA, back to stardust.
Right. That incredible fact that we're all made of elements forged in stars. It highlights this deep interconnectedness of all life. The suggestion is that our human spirit, our consciousness, isn't some weird add-on to the universe. But maybe it's the universe itself becoming aware through us that the potential for spirit was there all along. There's talk of a cosmogenic principle that cooperation is as fundamental as competition.
So this deep energy the sources mention, that's linked to the Holy Spirit.
That's the connection being made. It's seen as a way to understand God's power, the creator spirit, at work throughout all of reality. There's that beautiful saying quoted, "The spirit sleeps in the stone, dreams in the flower, stirs in the animal, and awakens in the human being."
That paints quite a picture of the Spirit being everywhere.
Absolutely. Pervasive.
Okay, this cosmic view is mind-blowing. But let's bring it back down to earth, maybe. How does all this affect how we, as Christians, should live? The last section is living by the Spirit.
Right. And the core idea is that the Spirit isn't just out there in the cosmos or back then in the Bible. It's the energy infusing everything, right here, right now, in your life, in mine.
It's the source of life itself.
Yes. Constantly creating, sustaining, renewing life. And the sources emphasize, with a special care for those pushed to the margins, the vulnerable, which gives us a mission, right?
To create conditions for life, especially for the poor.
Exactly. To actively work for justice and dignity. And remember that flesh versus spirit distinction.
Yeah, not body versus soul.
Right. Flesh is that inward-looking, selfish state, closed off to God's life. Living by the Spirit means resisting that. resisting worldly illusions, standing up against injustice. And it connects back to that warning about blasphemy against the Spirit.
The deliberate rejection of God's goodness.
Yes, but the flip side is freedom. Galatians 5 again. For freedom, Christ has set us free. The Spirit empowers that freedom.
And ultimately, it's about love.
Fundamentally, 1 John tells us God is love. The Holy Spirit is that divine love poured out, and that calls us, doesn't it, to a universal love, no exceptions.
Wow. The sources even mention participating in the divine nature.
Yeah, Terra Meter suggests that possibility through the Spirit. It's incredible. And then you have the practical gifts and fruits.
All right, the traditional 7 gifts: wisdom, understanding, counsel.
Fortitude, knowledge, piety, fear of the Lord, and the fruit from Galatians. Love, joy, peace, patience,
Kindness, goodness, faithfulness.
gentleness, self-control. These aren't abstract concepts. They're meant to be the actual results, the evidence of the Spirit living and working in us.
So the Spirit is active wherever you see real love, truth, solidarity, compassion.
That's the conviction. It's not confined to church buildings. It's out there, working. Those great hymns, Veni Creator Spiritus, the Brazilian one, I nos te sei, Divina Luz, they're cries for that Spirit, right? Expressions of needing that divine light in life.
It really brings it all together. So here's something to chew on maybe. Considering just how vast the Spirit's work is, from galaxies down to the details of your own life, how might really knowing that, really being aware of the Holy Spirit, change how you see God's presence? And maybe even change how you see your own part in it all?
That's the question, isn't it? We really hope this deep dive encourages you to keep exploring that, to look for those practical ways you can, open up more to living by the Spirit, letting that divine energy shape how you think, how you act, how you engage with God's world as a follower of Jesus.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pages to Dialogues. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found valuable insights to apply to your life. If you did, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, Pages to Dialogues, for more thought-provoking dialogues on Christian books.